Good afternoon. My name is Justin Fitzpatrick. I serve as the Membership and Communications Manager here at United Partners for Human Services, and we are more than happy to welcome you all to another United Partners for Human Services workshop entitled "The 411 on 211 Big Ben." Here at UPHS, we believe in the power of the collective, and many times you've seen us allow our members to present on various topics, and we found it not robbery to allow the 211 Big staff to share the impact of 211 Big Ben in their communities and the communities that we all serve here, but also to take some questions and to field a conversation on how we all can collaborate and create greater impact here within our Leon County and Tallahassee area. So without further ado, I will pass off the microphone and the presentation to Matt Goosey, the CEO of 211 Big Ben.
Great. Thank you, Justin. Thanks to you, Amber, the rest of the UPHS team for giving us this opportunity. Still like to consider myself fairly new to this job. So this is a good opportunity for me to see some faces that maybe I haven't seen in a while and talk about the important work that we're doing at 211. We have a number of slides we're going to go through that provide some explanation, some stats, some program descriptions. So we're going to go through those, and we'll have time at the end for questions, but we're going to try to get through the slides before we get to questions. I also know that there are some entities that we work with who maybe have some concerns they want to share with 211. Hoping this presentation will clarify some of those things, but we want to hear those. We want to hear the things that we can do better in our collective effort to do good things in this community. So we will jump right in. I assume everybody can see the presentation. We have some videos that little commercials that Kay Meyer has put together for us that are running on TV or certainly have run in the past, but they also kind of provide a visual and audio experience and description of what we do. So throughout the presentation, there's a handful that I'm going to play. So we'll start with this one.
Sometimes it feels like everything is going against you.
I'm sorry.
Like there is no way to get ahead, and there is no one on your side. But at 211 Big Bend, we're here to connect you with the community resources that you need.
Apply 211, how may I help you?
Because with 211, no one faces crisis alone. Call 211 today to see how we can help.
You may recognize faces in there because we used all local partners and people from this community for those commercials. So jumping right into who we are and what we do. We are experts that the community can call when they're trying to navigate what we all know can be very complicated systems to get their needs met. Every call, text, and chat is free, anonymous, and confidential. Our primary goal is to connect our citizens with the resources that they need. We are staffed by both paid staff and volunteers, all of which go through an incredibly intensive training process that includes 75 hours of training and then some additional significant time being monitored on those calls. So it is pretty intensive. We like to look for root problems. As you all know, most people, when they call, they think they have one issue, but through conversation, you find out that there are other things contributing to their situation. So we want to make sure that while we have somebody on the phone with us, that we do all we can to address all their needs. And there's multiple ways to connect with us. We web chat, we take text messages. You can dial 211-988, or we have a 9-digit number if people want to try to commit that to memory, but I would go with 211. And we'll talk a little bit more about those in a second. We're the only 3-digit number, 211, in this community that connects callers 24/7, 365, with a live counselor who speaks to them without judgment and with empathy. And that really is at the core of the training that we do, to be non-judgmental, to be empathetic, and to really help the caller figure out and work with them to address their needs. All the calls are free, anonymous, and confidential. So there are other 3-digit numbers. Here's a brief description of the ones in our community. 988, which is a suicide and mental health crisis. That is a national suicide lifeline, suicide prevention lifeline. We have the contract for that and handle those calls in this community. 911, everyone's aware of that. Fire, ambulance, police, and then 211, suicide and mental health crisis, with an emphasis on those community resources that I mentioned earlier. So last year, just to give you all a little bit of a sense of the scope and the volume, last fiscal year, we had over 22,000 total calls come into our office. That translated into almost 331,000 minutes of contact on the phone with callers. As I mentioned, our business model requires a lot of volunteer support, so we captured the volunteer hours. Veterans, that particular demographic, just over 2,000 calls. I'll talk about our veteran program here in a little bit. We also do follow-up calls, and I'll kind of expand on that as well. But we will follow up with callers to see if they got the services that they were looking for from the provider in the community. And through that, gave 28,665 referrals. And probably goes without saying, but 22,000 calls, 28,000 referrals. Often our callers need more than one referral. And that goes back to what I said earlier about really trying to make sure that while we have the person on the phone, that we are doing all we can to address all of their needs. So this is an important slide, and I think, going to my comments in the beginning about how we can be better for you and for our community and vice versa, it really does require us all to work together. Things you can do for us as you're talking with people who may be coming into your organization is educate them on 211, and that we can maybe help with things that your particular organization is not set up to do. Work with us to keep the information up to date and accurate. And this is really key. We have just over 3,200 resources in our database. We update those resources annually, but on a monthly basis, it's 250 to 350 providers that we are updating monthly. But you shouldn't wait as a provider to notify us of a service that maybe is no longer available or a new service that you have. The best example is around funding. Those partners of ours that work in the housing space or utilities that get these spurts of money to help people in the community. If that is in our database that you have funding for those particular services, unless someone tells us the funding is no longer available, we're going to continue to refer people to your organization. The best example and most recent example that I can give is with Family Promise. We sat down with their leadership team and really had this conversation on how we could open up better chains of communication between our entities. So with an organization like that, where when funding is available is depleted very quickly, we now have a good process in place to where we have the right people talking to each other from each organization, so that we are not sending callers to Family Promise for a service that they don't have the funding for. And we're happy to do that with any organization to open up those chains of communication, so that we have accurate information about what you have available, and we are sharing that information with callers. We've got handouts that we're happy to drop off at your organization. If you want pamphlets in your waiting room or your lobby, we can certainly do that. And if you're not in our resource database and think you should be, let's have that conversation as well. And you can contact us through our website, or there'll be some contact information, I think, towards the end. And Amber and UPHS certainly knows how to get in touch with us if you want to take that route as well. So this slide probably isn't much of a surprise, and this is pretty consistent year over year. Our top caller needs are housing, transportation, mental health support, utilities, and food. So basic needs right at the top. And mental health support, a lot of the housing, transportation, and utility and food needs contribute to some of the mental health support that callers are needing. So this is what our community is telling us, well, by calling us, that our most needed areas are. So one of the other things we do when someone calls is that we will advocate on their behalf. We capture data on all the social services and partner nonprofits from every caller. We identify gaps in care by confirming with callers if needs were met. So, for example, someone calls us, we refer them to an agency. We will follow up with them to say, hey, we gave you a referral to X agency. Did you make contact with them? Were they able to help you? We'll also advocate for those callers in the instances where perhaps they left a message or sent an email and haven't heard anything. We will call the partner agency and say, hey, we referred Matt to you a couple weeks ago. He said he left a message, or he said he sent an email. Just want to see if you got that so we can help make that connection. And then, of course, we meet with local officials and stakeholders like you all. Hopefully, this is the first of many conversations between our organizations. But to make, and we use that data that we collect, and we'll have some slides on that to help inform policy changes. And again, our data is all open source. You're going to see how you can get to it, and I would venture that it's probably some helpful information for you as you are also advocating for your individual programs. So we have a number of programs that we host here. Helpline 211 is an 8-county region. 988 Suicide Crisis Lifeline is most of North Florida. Help Me Grow, I'll dig into. Really cool program that focuses on child development and making sure that children are developing as they should be. That is one of the few kind of face-to-face programs that we have where our staff will go out and perform this service. Our Florida Veterans Support Line, Lift Ride United. We'll talk about that some more. We have the Comprehensive Resource Directory, which again is on our website and people can go there. But often, as I mentioned earlier, people who go to the website think they only have one need. By calling us, we can help make sure that all of the needs are addressed. We've got a mental health directory that covers 18 counties. I'll show you a little bit of that. The Florida HIV and AIDS hotline is statewide, as well as our family health line is statewide.
Matt, real quick in the chat, someone's asking, is the transportation only for veterans?
Yes, and we have a slide to that. That's what it is currently. We are working to expand that. Originally, when it was set up, and I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but I'll address it now. Originally, when we set up the program, it was for anyone in the community to go to very defined locations, a job interview, a food bank, a doctor's appointment. The volume of calls we received and the need that we that showed itself was so much that in order to stretch the funding a little bit longer, we had to focus on veterans. Our goal, and we're actively doing this, is to get the funding we need to make this available to the entire community. So a little bit about Help Me Grow. My background mostly in Tallahassee and nonprofit world was in early childhood education. So I have a soft spot in my heart for this work. Most of our brain development, we've all heard the stats, happens before the age of 5. So this is a great opportunity, free of charge, for parents who might be noticing or have some concerns to contact us so we can do an assessment on their child to see if they're developing appropriately. We've really emphasized and staffed up thanks to some additional funding we've received from the Help Me Grow Florida. So we've seen a lot of growth in being able to get out there in the community, and just between the months of January and February, we had 266% outreach increase. That's going to events and being present. 200% call increase. It's kind of staggering. 125% increase in the children we served, and a 26% increase in referrals provided. So not just with us, but with your work, once the word gets out and it's consistently out there, we see these type of increases. So very excited about that. When we talk about our veterans line, this is a really, I'm a veteran myself, so I think this is a really important program, primarily because our veterans line is staffed by veterans. That is a moment in time, or whether you did 4 years or 27 years, it will always be ingrained in you to a degree. So having people answering calls who have walked in your shoes is incredibly important, and really is kind of the secret sauce of this program. So a veteran will answer the phone, provide information and referral to VA-funded services, advocate and navigate the VA process. Well, what you can probably imagine can be quite complicated and not too user-friendly at times. So we want to make sure we help veterans with that. And this is for veterans and their families. So here we have another video break related to veterans.
Oh my goodness, look at this guy. Where do you come from? The pizza? The pineapples?
So the LIFT program, I just kind of covered most of this, but it started in 2019. And while I wasn't here, my understanding, it obviously was directly related to COVID and people's inability to get to where they need or get to appointments. So it started in 2019, but in 22-23, with a budget of $50,000, we provided 2,661 round trip rides. And again, this is not somebody who wants to go see a movie or go to a department store. These were very defined locations, and the volume was still that intense. It began to run out about 8 months into that funding cycle, and that's when we decided to focus the shift our focus to veterans. But our goal is to get some additional funding, and are having some promising conversations to do that. And we will certainly advertise that as soon as that funding becomes available. Since 2020, we have completed, so this is over the length of the program, over 11,000 rides to food pantries, veteran services, and employment services. So, the city of Tallahassee, they do the best they can with their public transportation. Certainly not a knock on them, but everyone on this call understands that just the vital importance of reliable transportation to get to appointments. So clearly a need for our community that we are excited to hopefully contribute more to very soon. So when you look overall at, we looked at the slide about the top 5 reasons we get calls, and that is about 70% of the total calls we receive are people seeking basic needs: food insecurity, transportation, and most callers seeking resources have underlying needs related to mental health. And I think it's important to reiterate that when you call us, even if a caller says, all I need is food, we're going to give them that resource, but we want to develop some trust in relationship with that caller, whether it's in 2 minutes or we have calls that go on for hours at times, to be able to help them holistically. So that's part of our model. That's real important to making sure our community members are getting what they need. One of the things that we do provide to the community, there is a cost associated with it. The cost is simply to cover the materials, but it's a program called ASSIST, which is Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training. It's a weekend, so you're going to have to give up a Saturday or Sunday, but I have heard nothing but rave reviews about it. It's intensive, but it's I don't want to say fun because the topic is a tough one, but it keeps people engaged, and it really helps folks recognize, see, and start to tune in to other people, whether it be in the workplace or in their family, that maybe are experiencing some thoughts that we want to get to sooner rather than later. Just some stats about the ASSIST program. The one down here in the corner, ASSIST Impact in 2016, and granted that was a while ago. There were 87,000 participants, and I think this is nationally, resulting in 108,000 interventions, and over 15,000 suicide attempts were prevented. That's life-saving and life-changing. So it is a very impactful program. And under the ASSIST Change Lives, you can see where the people going through the training have seen an increase, that they're more helpful, less depressed, less overwhelmed, less suicidal. So very good program. Suicide is something that I think we all know is an epidemic. It's happening to children. We've got young people starting, I believe, in early adolescence to early 20s is the highest at-risk demographic. In 2021, over 48,000 people died by suicide. 12.3 million adults seriously have thought about suicide. 3.5 million adults made a plan 1.7 million main attempt, and 132 lives a day are lost to suicide. So it is a very real thing.
Man, what they want? Oh God, I hate this school. I really hate it. Hey, bro, off. Really? Break. I got so much homework, man. What they doing? Why not even join this team? Work is such a major burden. They're right for I can't take this anymore.
So how can you help? Because this is going to require an all-in effort from a community standpoint. Talking to an accepting person can reduce suicide, someone at risk, by 40%. There are a number of resources. We've listed them here. These are national resources. But also remember that 988 three-digit number is something anyone can call and get connected to counselors who can work with them.
And
So
Matt,
this
real
is,
quick, I'm sorry,
yeah.
Matt. In the chat, Ashley asked if there's scholarships to offset the cost for assist. I believe you guys offer that at no cost. Is that correct? The training?
We do if it's, I don't know. Stephen, are you on? Do you want to jump in and answer
Hi.
that?
Yes, I can go ahead and speak to that really quick. So, with Assist in mind, we actually do have that upfront charge for all community members. Now, we're not really able to offer scholarships at this point in time, but I will say this as one of the co-facilitators for the training. If cost really is a barrier for somebody, I still want them to go ahead and sign up, and then that way, Paulina, my co-trainer, and I can get in touch with them and see if we can make some kind of an arrangement. So, I hope that answers your question.
All right. Thank you, Stephen. Always good to have backup. So when it comes to calls that we receive, the good news is 98% of the people who call, chat, or text to our 988 suicide lifeline or call 211 get the support they need and do not require additional services in the moment. These calls in particular, as they relate to suicide, as you can imagine, can be long and in depth, with our goal of really creating some safety planning for the individual that will get them through that moment of crisis, and then we can follow up with them. And we want them to be safe in the moment. And we have a pretty good, 98% is a pretty good success rate in that area. So over 4,000 calls were received by us. 85 callers were in imminent risk of death last fiscal year. 66% of those callers were kept safe through voluntary hospitalization or intervention from a third party. This could be a family member, it could be a sponsor. The other 33% of callers had emergency services response initiated without their permission. And this really goes to the heart of what I consider a pretty significant misconception about 988. Our goal, anyone who calls 988, our goal is not to have them Baker acted or committed involuntarily. We want to work through the moment, get them in a safe place, and connect them with resources, sponsors, other organizations. So the idea, and I've heard this a couple times, that, oh, if I call 988, they're just going to Baker Act me. That is the last thing we want to do. So that would be one of those things that you can help us spread the word on, because I think it's out there. Now, it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Sometimes people, that is the best course of action for them, but that is a last resort for us. So if you could help spread the word, we would greatly appreciate it. And by the way, we don't have the authority to Baker Act. You know, that'd have to come from a law enforcement officer or a licensed clinician who's maybe sent to the scene. We don't make that determination. So since 2021, a 38% increase in the calls we've received on that line. That's pretty significant. An 83% increase in veterans linked to services who have called that line. And 92% increase in Help Me Grow and connecting children and families to services. So that's kind of a overall, just to show you the increase in 3 of our programs. It's on the upswing, which is a good thing, that people are being more finding us and are comfortable with calling, but it also does reinforce the need in the community.
Thanks for applying. but we're looking for someone with more experience.
Your payment from last month was short again.
Hey, Dad, I was wondering if you could send me some money.
You're no longer hiring candidates. Please stop leaving us messages.
So one of the things that, again, it started before me, but there was some funding made available to create a database of mental health resources in the community, and we did. And it's on our website. We're going to show you a little bit of that. So anyone can go now, and we update this regularly. I think Kay said there's over 400 mental health professionals in this database. And what we really like about this, and this is a screenshot, is we hope that it helps the person looking for services really tailor the search. If you go in on Google and type in mental health counselors in Tallahassee, you're going to spend the better part of a day trying to find someone who's really going to fit your needs. As you can see on the screen, we can do it by city, zip code, the county you're in, and then through ticking some boxes, we can hopefully narrow down that search. Once you kind of hit submit, it's going to provide you a list of people that meet that criteria, of counselors that meet that criteria, which hopefully will save you some time and get you connected to the person who can help you most efficiently and quickly. Another public-facing database that we have, which I think is a great source of data, is bigben.211counts.org. That's where you can go and look at today, yesterday, a year ago, the last 3 months. You can sort and file and get an idea of what areas of need people are calling us with. It's in real time, and this is kind of what it looks like. Kay ran this on the 19th, so this is from March 19th. And you can play with how it's filtered, how it's displayed, but this will show you on that particular day what issues people were calling the most about. Again, it goes back to that slide: housing, food, utilities, mental health, transportation. But this is a great resource that I think anybody, as we all are, all being nonprofits, data is very important to us, being able to make our case. So hopefully you all will use this, and it will be effective for your funders. We also play a pretty significant role during an emergency response, thinking about really weather, hurricanes or things like that. We are on all the calls with all of the emergency management, local, state. So we are updating our resources in real time, evacuation zones. We can help direct people who maybe have been impacted to the right FEMA number or form. All the feeding stations, all of those things we collect. And my experience was with the most recent storm, Idalia, and I was new to it, but I just saw this constant communication between our staff and emergency management and other nonprofits, and we were updating things on the fly. So really impressive that in really these times of stress and being unsure, that calling 211, we have a pretty good grip on what the available resources are. Pretty interesting snapshot that this is over a 2-year period from November 2017 through October 2019, just to kind of provide a visual on the uptick in calls we got during Hurricane Michael. Everything's pretty steady, and then skyrocketed to over almost 4,000 calls answered in a very short period of time. That's a lot of calls for us. So as we look ahead, it's kind of what I started out with you all, is that we want and need to be good partners with each and every one of you. We want and need to have the most current and accurate information about your resources so we can share with a caller. We understand that when people show up on your doorstep or call saying that 211 said you had these resources, that is a tough conversation and interaction to have. But again, we are only sending them there because that's the information we have in our database. And one other thing I'll share about that: if someone calls or shows up and says, well, 211 told me that if I come, you'll put me to the front of the line, that is something we never say. Doesn't surprise me that somebody might say that. That 211 told me to call and you can help, but we are just sharing the resources. So I know that's happened. I've heard from some of you that that does happen, but we are not at all saying use our name and you'll get services quicker. So there's our website, everything that we've shared, the individual programs, the mental health directory, 211 counts, all of that, our directory of resources, all of that is available on our website. So please use that as a resource. And that's also a way you can get in contact with us. And now we're ready for questions.
Real quick before we go to the chat and see if there are additional questions, I know this is a little premature, but I know it's been talked at county meetings. Do you want to share a little bit about the potential for the CIE here in our community? Obviously, understanding that it's not anything that is ready to be rolled out and maybe not for a few years, but just so the agencies can get a feel for what that could look like in the future.
Absolutely. It is. It's kind of like the dream system when it comes to human services. Essentially, what it does is it creates a closed loop for referrals. So right now, someone calls us, we give them a referral and send them on their way to make connection with the agency. And a portion of the people that we interact with will do a follow-up call. I cover that. But what the community information exchange would do would create a virtual digital platform in which a referral can be sent from our agency to a participating agency. The other agency would acknowledge receipt of that, maybe keep some notes on the interaction and the referral that they provided the individual or the service they provided the individual, with the idea of having a higher level of comfort that that caller went and was served, but also for everybody involved would kind of show us the history of different callers. Like it almost creates, you can, if you can imagine, a portfolio or briefcase of the services that an individual has had. So we could see that Matt was directed to Second Harvest. He received some food, and that was in April. And now in May, he went here for housing or here for utilities. So it really creates a much more solid system from the standpoint of knowing that people are going and getting the services they've wanted. Amber's 100% right. This is aspirational, and this is something that we talk about with a lot of energy, but is not something that will happen overnight. If you're interested, San Diego, California has this in place. They have a website dedicated to that if you kind of want to read a little bit more of how they're doing it. But definitely something that we're talking about and hope to be a part of in the future.
Thank you, Matt. So I wanted to jump in. We had a couple people who privately sent text messages. Can you kind of explain? I know in the last couple months, we've been really running up against this where none of the agencies have had any funding. So when you all refer somebody and nobody has any funding, is there a loop back or, what's that process? Because we've gotten calls from the city and the county who are like, hey, we need y'all to try to help figure out, make some calls, but when there's no funding, there's no funding. So can you kind of speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, it's a very real thing. And LaShawn, I would say it starts with, if we're sending people, if we're making referrals to agencies that don't have funding, it's because we don't know they have it. And that's what goes back to that communication. It's got to be two-way. When you run out of funding, let us know, and we're no longer going to refer people there. Now we know that, especially in the basic needs, the organizations in the community that actually have funding at times throughout the year are minimum, and that is a tough conversation to have. But we would never send somebody to an agency that has notified us that they're not out of funding. We're not just going to pass them off when we know there's no funding there. So we might look for alternatives or talk through with the caller, using Family Promise again as the example. Because we've set up these communication chains, we can tell callers that, there's not space available now. The waiting list is 40 people long, whatever the case may be, so that we are being truthful and upfront with the callers when they call and not giving them unreasonable expectations of service. So it really, again, if we communicate better at the 211 and the agency or organization level about when that funding is available and when it's not, we could alleviate some of the stress that our partners on this call are feeling, and quite frankly, the callers who are in crisis, to send them to a place where there's no services. That's obviously not doing them any good. So it's a tough conversation to have. Our counselors will have that conversation with a caller to say, right now, there is no funding available for what you're seeking, but here's what we can tell you about a waiting list, when funding might be available again. So we don't want to send them to a place that doesn't have funding at the time. And we know as soon as that money is available, it goes that quick. And it can seem burdensome to have to call 211 today to say we have funding and call them tomorrow to say we don't. But ultimately, that is a benefit to everybody involved in that. Does that answer your question?
It does, and I wanted to make sure that that was said out loud for
Yeah,
our member
thank
agencies
you.
and partners, because it comes up quite a bit.
Thank you. I understand that can be frustrating.
So the
And I
floor,
have another.
go ahead, Amber.
I was just going to say, but I wanted to wait and see if anybody else had questions, because I don't want to speak over our members, who I know probably do. All right. My question for you all, and I think you've touched on it, and I know that you all have made lots of strides in creating real-time updates from an agency perspective, but what does an ideal partnership with our UPHS member agencies and 211 look like to keeping your information accurate, but also, you know, if we hear this need, we know this is the right pathway. What does that look like, and how can our agencies begin to build that partnership with you all?
Yeah, I'll certainly happy to. It's a great question. I'll take a stab at it. And if any of my staff want to jump in and add to it, I would welcome that. So there are some agencies where their core services don't change. You know, so maybe that annual update is all that we need. Hey, is everything still the way it is? Is your website still accurate? And they don't see much fluctuation in the services they provide. I would say that for those entities, especially that receive funding that may be short term to assist with some basic needs, or if you add a program or remove a program, anything that significantly changes what you're offering, make us aware of that as soon as possible. We will update that. It goes immediately out to all of our callers to say, hey, there's been a change in services at this organization. Because just to give you some context, when someone calls, we have a database with these 3,400, and we're doing keyword searches, and it pops up hours of operation, days of operation, the services provided. So our staff are basing the referrals on what they have in front of them. And if we don't get an opportunity to update those as things change, they're going to be reading the same thing and giving these callers the hope that these are the services that are still provided. So that's a long way for me to say that if you run an organization where your services are consistent and really don't change, then that annual update might be enough. But if you have a constant change in the services you're offering, certainly funding that would be available to people in the community, we want those communications to happen as soon as you know, because we will update it that day, make the change, and then the people on our hotlines have the most current information, so that the best information is being shared.
Awesome. And one last thing, and then we'll open it back up again. We do have some new partners on the phone. For people whose agency is not registered with 211, how can they do that?
You can go through our website. There's a contact tab up there. That's probably the best way to do it. That way it'll get to the right person. And then we'll reach out and we'll have the conversation with that provider. What are the services you provide, hours of operation, everything I just laid out. I will point out, and I know with this particular group, it probably doesn't apply, but the vast majority of our services are nonprofits. There are a handful of for-profit organizations in there, but only because the service they provide might not be being provided by a nonprofit in the community. So we focus on nonprofits. Shoot us the email, and somebody from our information and referral team will reach out pretty quick and get you into our database.
Awesome. So any other questions before we close out? And thanks, Mandy, for your comment. Any other questions? All right, so if you are interested in the course of suicide awareness, suicide support, both Stephen and Paulina, the assist course, commented, and they will work with you. I know a lot of agencies that training is required. So if you're interested in that, you can reach out to them. If for some reason you need to connect, you can reach out to the team here, and we'll be happy to connect you to the team. And anything you need, 211 is a UPHS member, and we're happy they're a member. Just feel free to reach out, and we will support as much as we can. We want to thank Matt and the team for facilitating this workshop today. And Matt, Kay, Stephen, Paulina, anybody in the team, if you all have any announcements or anything that is up and coming, feel free to do that now while we have the members on the line.
Okay, do we have anything to announce? Next February, though, we have our annual event, so keep an eye open for that. But thank you for that opportunity. Nothing at this point. Really appreciate that the partnership we have with UPHS, the great partnerships we have with a lot of organizations, and the growing and developing partnerships we will have with other organizations. So let us know how we can help and be a part of making this community a little bit better.
And I dropped the contact page in the chat as well. If people want to click on that, there's a wealth of places contact areas you can click on if you have questions, or if you'd like to be added, or if you have any questions for volunteering, anything like that. That's the page. I just dropped it in there.
Do you see that, LaShawn? I don't see it.
I don't see it. I'm scrolling back up. Maybe it didn't go through. But while we're waiting on that, just want to remind you all, our agency bazaar in partnership with FSU and FAMU is April the 16th at the Florida State Alumni Center. It's a great way to showcase your agency and meet people from other agencies, right? We have to come out of our silos and know who we're working with. So when we call an agency, we know people by first name when we're making a referral. There it is. And then our conference early bird registration is ending next week. Those of you that are sending multiple people, now is the time to do that, because prices will go up after March 31st. And so if you have any questions about that, you can certainly reach out to one of the members of the team, and we'll be glad to assist you with that. So please copy the link, those of you who want to get connected with 211. As always, all of our UPHS trainings are recorded. And so if you want a copy of the recording, reach out to Justin and he will be glad to get that for you. We did have a question to come up. Whenever a person reaches out and asks for utility assistance, do you all offer any other services?
Let me see if I understand the question. In addition to utility, I mean, we're going to obviously, hopefully connect them with somebody who can help. But if somebody calls with utility assistance and we determine that through our conversation with them, there are additional needs, we'll certainly provide them additional referrals as well.
Awesome. All righty. Well, you all be well. We're going to give you 15 minutes of your time back. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. So get out, take a walk and stretch, shake off those end of the day sleep, monsters that like to jump on us. And we will see you all soon. Amber, did you have anything?
Nope. I was just going to say bye. It was good to see everybody, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all.